The country is marking yet another milestone in the life of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his birthday. And it is perhaps a great time to look at how the Prime Minister has impacted not just our lives but also, of course, India. There is one facet that many people attribute to Modi, one major contribution they talk about, how he has propelled the rise of Hindu consciousness in India. Let's examine this. In my book, Modi in India, there is a reference to a pivotal moment in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tenure. The image of Modi executing a Dandvat Pranam before the idol of Lord Ram in August 2020. You'll see it on your screens as we speak. The setting was the Bhumi Pujan in Ayodhya of the spot where the Ram temple was going to be built. That day, back in time, Prime Minister Modi transformed from being just a devotee to a new Hindu Surat Rana, the defender of the faith, so to speak. As an unapologetic Hindu, Prime Minister Modi has given Hindus the confidence to wear their Hinduness on their sleeves, so to speak. This assertion of faith has visibly transformed India's political, electoral and cultural landscape, perhaps forever. Modi not only celebrates Hindu traditions in public, but he has also firmly championed the reclamation of Bharat from a ruthless, westernized elite that equated any legitimate appreciation of the grandeur of Hindu civilization as anti-secular. For years altogether, the ideological left in India had succeeded, for example, in taking the Hindu out of the Indian. Anyone talking about the need to build a Ram temple, reclaim Hindu temples, draw inspiration from the Vedas, or advocate Dharma was labelled a Sanghi, a Bajrangi, a Hindu fundamentalist and so on. You know what I'm talking about. Narendra Modi's journey in politics is deeply rooted in the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or the RSS, a Hindu nationalist organization that promotes an idea of India which is inseparable from its Hindu heritage. The RSS dreams about a Hindu Rashtra, a nation where all are equal but subscribe to a larger Hindu civilization, dharma or tradition, much like British, Polish, Italians, Greeks, while all from different Christian denominations by and large, see themselves as Europeans. Unfortunately, the left equated Sanatana or Hindu dharma with religion. The left said, we should be dharm nirpeksh, agnostic to dharma. But dharma is only a code of ethics. How can a country be dharm nirpeksh, that is devoid of dharma? A country without dharma will be lawless and ethically compromised. It won't be a country that other nations around the world will look upon favorably. The RSS has never argued for a Hindu Rajya, that is a Hindu state where only the majority is privileged. It is talked about a Hindu Rashtra, a nation with Hindu sensibilities, a Sanatan Dharmic nation, not a religious state. That is the reason why Prime Minister Modi never tires of emphasizing his commitment to Sabka Saath. And Modi, if you look back at his years in office, his tenure, for example, as the Chief Minister of Gujarat from 2001 to 2014, and his rise to national prominence, you will see were marked by his firm alignment with this ideology that he obviously has traced to his own roots in the RSS. His appeal was multifaceted. He presented himself as a pro-business, development-oriented leader while also championing Hindu interests. This dual appeal was called Moditwa and allowed Modi to tap into the aspirations of both India's middle class and its majority, a strategy that became even more pronounced once he assumed the office of Prime Minister in 2014. Modi's speeches frequently invoke Hindu symbols, festivals, and historical figures. His oratory often references epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata, positioning these cultural narratives as national symbols. By doing so, Modi connects the idea of Indian nationalism with Hindu consciousness, promoting the narrative that Hinduism is the foundational ethos of the nation. It is much beyond being a religion. It is an overarching ethical framework. Hindutva and governance. This is how Mr. Modi has relied upon his RSS background to also get government to work to elevating a sense of Hindu civilizational ethos and values. Policy impacts. Modi's government has implemented several policies that reflect the ideology of Hindutva, elevating Hindu consciousness through political and administrative means. These policies often emphasize cultural revivalism, education reforms, and national security, all framed within a broader Hindu narrative. Modi has made a concerted effort to reclaim India's ancient cultural and spiritual heritage. For instance, the government has increased funding for the restoration of Hindu temples and historical sites associated with Hinduism. Institutions like the Indian Council of Historical Research have been asked to not just revisit the portrayal of Indian history, but also formally introduce it among the public sphere. It has been asked to particularly focus on periods that showcase India's Hindu past in a more prominent light. The renaming of cities to reflect their Hindu heritage has also been part of this effort. For example, Allahabad was renamed Prayagraj, reclaiming its ancient Hindu name. These symbolic gestures signal a shift in how Indian history and culture are framed, with an emphasis on reclaiming Hindu identity from what is seen as centuries of colonial and Mughal influence. In fact, the Prime Minister constantly asks the people to shake off the colonial yoke. Then, of course, there was the Citizenship Amendment Act, the CA, and the National Register for Citizens, or the NRC. The passage of the CA in 2019, and of course the proposed implementation of a nationwide National Register for Citizens, were seen by many as direct attempts to reshape India's demographic fabric. The Modi government said that the CA offered a fast-track route to citizenship for non-Muslim religious minorities from neighboring countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. The act was presented as a humanitarian gesture towards persecuted religious minorities. Those who argue that it undermined the secular fabric of India's constitution forget that even in secular America, such laws exist that provide for, quote, reasonable classification, unquote, privileging citizenship for one class of individuals, in the case of America, Christians. But despite the existence of such laws, America hasn't become a homeland only for Christians. It hasn't become a Christian state. It remains, however, a Christian nation. Then there have been a slew of educational reforms so that we connect with our Hindu ethos. Modi's government has also made significant changes to India's educational curriculum. These reforms emphasize India's ancient Hindu knowledge systems, including the incorporation of subjects like yoga, Sanskrit, and Vedic studies. The new education policy, the NEP 2020, aims to revive traditional Indian knowledge systems while making education more aligned with India's cultural roots, its dharmic traditions. This, again, is in line with the broader Hindutva agenda of emphasizing Hinduism as an essential part of Indian identity. Then, friends, you will remember the abrogation of Article 370. One of Modi's most significant political moves was the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A in 2019, which granted special autonomy to the region of Jammu and Kashmir. For the BJP and its Hindu nationalist base, The integration of Kashmir into the Indian Union was a long-standing demand. The abrogation of Article 370 was framed as a step towards national integration. But it is also about asserting the primacy of Hindu interests in a region that has been a flashpoint of Hindu-Muslim tensions for decades. There has been a fear that after the pogrom against Kashmiri Hindus, the valley was turning into an exclusivist preserve for the Muslim community. And that would militate against the all-inclusive ethos of India. Narendra Modi has also elevated consciousness Hindu consciousness amongst us all through his politics by succeeding in consolidating the Hindu vote like never before. While earlier political parties sought to balance the interests of various communities, for example, under the Congress, Hindu religious customs were codified, but not those of Muslims or other minority faiths. Exceptions were constantly made for vote bank politics. This was just one way in which Hindus were discriminated. There were several other stratagems, legal ones, to appease minorities and win their favor. Modi's brand of politics often centered around mobilizing Hindu voters through appeals to Hindu historical grievances and promise of equity. I'll give you a few examples. Hindus are not allowed to reclaim their places of worship because the law forbids them, a Congress-era law. Modi has always said that if India has to be a truly secular democracy, then there can be no discrimination on claims of places of worship. Modi has also obviously said on a number of occasions that all citizens, if we are to live in a secular nation, must be judged by civil law, the UCC. But friends, even though the UCC is a promise in the Constitution, falling under the directive principles of state policy, something to aspire to, all these years, political parties, especially Congress governments, have not moved towards fulfilling that directive that owes its origins to the Constitution of India. A country where all are equal in the eyes of the law is an Ambedkarite principle. The Prime Minister, by campaigning on this issue, hopes that we can move fundamentally forward, drawing from the dharmic roots which are pluralistic and inclusive. There's also been an international projection of Hindu consciousness. Modi, on his overseas trips, often includes visits to Hindu temples and meetings with the Indian diaspora, who play a crucial role in promoting India's soft power. Modi's emphasis on yoga as a global symbol of India's cultural heritage, and an inclusive one, culminating in the United Nations declaring International Yoga Day in 2014, is yet another example of how Hindu consciousness, dharmic consciousness, has been promoted as part of India's global identity. In conclusion, Modi's efforts to elevate Hindu consciousness will be judged by how well India balances its Hindu cultural resurgence with its foundational commitment to pluralism and diversity. And we must, at this point, recall the Prime Minister's appeal to all of us, that while we might look back to reclaim our Hindu civilizational roots, we must remember that the core principles that undergird Hindu civilizational thought is inclusiveness. Sarva Dharma Sambhava and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Let us, as we move forward, be guided by these principles. That will perhaps be, in some ways, a tribute to Prime Minister Modi's legacy, his life's ambition and his work.